Nicole Hoffman and James Nutlin are both Intel analysts at Cisco Talos. Nicole is also a children's book author. I'm proud to have a signed copy of Mighty Threat Intelligence Warrior on my bookshelf at home. Please welcome Nicole and James.
You're probably wondering, who are these fancy pirates? Well, initially, the last group said they were going to be cosplaying as Zelda characters, and I got so excited that we were following them that I'm like, all right, we gotta
step up the game.
Yeah. So once again, I'm Nicole Hoffman. This is my coworker.
I'm James Nutlin.
And thanks so much for having us. Thanks for coming to the presentation. I know it's getting later in the day, so hopefully we can liven things up a little bit. It's a great opportunity to be able to speak at ATT&CKcon, so thank you so much for the ATT&CKcon. We are from the Cisco Talos Threat Intelligence and Interdiction team. Today we're going to be talking about the benefits of creating your own knowledge base, specifically using ATT&CK for adversary tracking.
So first, we're going to go into a little bit of a cast introduction, speak a little bit about ourselves, our experience, and maybe an interesting fact or so. Then we're going to move into the curse of the forgotten TTPs, how we often forget to use our procedures in our research. Then we're going to go over organization, how we can use a small Excel sheet to a more collaborative, granular platform, such as Vertex Synapse. And then stick around because we have a deep dive into Qakbot commodity loader. Then we'll do a little recap and provide a few resources before Q&A.
So some of you might know me as Nicole Hoffman, but you also might know me as Threat Hunter Girl, which is my handle on social media. It's also the name of my publishing company for the Mighty Threat Intelligence Warrior series. It is a children's book series. The newest one just came out. It's called The Bewitching Botmaster on Amazon. You should totally check it out. Or if you're here in person, I do have some copies. I'm also the creator of the Cognitive Stairways of Analysis framework, and I'm a massive Spider-Man and Lego enthusiast.
And I am a cyber threat intelligence analyst at Cisco Talos. I've typically had most of my experience in blue team operations and security management. I have an academic background in counterterrorism, digital surveillance. So I've used a lot of tools like Cubes, Tails, played around with different Android ROMs. I got my first foray into all things cyber when I was given a laptop by the school, and it had content software on there. And I wasn't too happy about that, so I learned how to remove it. So I'm also a competitive club rugby player.
So I want to rant for just a little bit about ATT&CK and where we are, I feel, as an industry, specifically in cyber threat intelligence or vendors that put out reports, whether it's internal reports, external reports, blogs. So just by a show of hands, how many of you have read something either internally or externally, specifically for threat intelligence, that has a MITRE ATT&CK index at the bottom? Okay, so if you're listening at home, this is pretty much everyone in the room. Another show of hands, how many times does it have procedures that are not just a general example, but actually how it was done and how they explained it in the report or blog? Okay, like 2, 3. So I feel like as someone who's like new to like tracking threat actors and new to supporting incident response and new to like threat hunting, that's the stuff where all the context is. And so if I'm looking at, report and they say, okay, it's, Qakbot and they got in through this way and they use this technique and this tactic, that's great. But there's like 50 million ways to do that tactic. So how can I use that information to see if it's going on in my telemetry without the procedures? The other thing I've noticed is ATT&CK has become more of like a checklist item where people are just like, oh, right, I got to do the attack thing. I guess I'll just throw a couple at the bottom and just yeet it over the dissemination fence. But who's that helping? Like, maybe I could say for educational purpose, you're taking the time. If you actually did take the time to map it, it could benefit you. But if you're not, then it's not helping the person that's digesting that report. Specifically, too, if it's an intelligence report, you need some context, which is where the procedures are. So we shouldn't let them die. So we could be doing a lot more with this information other than just kind of yeeting it out there.
So to quote a very famous, depending on if you watch pirate movies, pirate Captain Barbossa, the pirate code is more of what you call guidelines than actual rules. Attack can be used as an individualized knowledge base that can be crafted for your own specific repository of threat intelligence. It can enable defensive measures. It can map actor behavior across time, and it can be a teaching tool, especially for people like us that don't typically have a large background in threat intelligence.
So if you haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean, this is one of the movies in the series. It's from Dead Man's Chest, and the character holding the jar of dirt is Captain Jack Sparrow. And why is he holding a jar of dirt? Because he has a debt to pay to Davy Jones. And Davy Jones can't go on land, but I think like one day every 10 years. And so he thinks if he holds up the jar of dirt, then he's solid. So does that sound familiar to anyone? Does anyone say, we do attack, we're good. We do attack, guys, we're good. No, we don't want you to just have a jar of dirt. We want you to use the jar of dirt. And some of you might be thinking, well, we already have our own knowledge base. We're saving the TTPs, and we have context, and we have procedures. Well, that's awesome. I hope you will still stick around for some fun pirate puns and some Qakbot goodies at the end. But if you don't have your own jar of dirt, you probably have the data. So whether it's incident response data, threat hunting, stuff from OSINT, you could be saving all that information and specifically mapping it to attack because it's a common taxonomy that can be used. And regardless of where you're starting, whether you have a lot of resources or a small amount of resources, you can start from anywhere, and we're going to show you how.
So we're going to come in hard and fast with the pirate puns and do exactly what pirates do best and steal somebody else's idea. So this is the Pirate Ship of Pain. And I'm sure we're all aware of the Pyramid of Pain by Dave Bianco. He's here today with us. And it depicts simple hash values to complex TTPs and how that disrupts threat actor behavior. Now, at the top is the flag mast. And if you take out the flag mast, it is the most impactful to attacking a ship. So if the flag mast goes down, the ship can't go anywhere, and it's a sitting duck. Same with threat actors. If you take away their TTPs, they're left scrambling.
So the first thing that you need to do, whether you have a existing knowledge base or you don't, really, I made this with CRAN, the CRAI, the AI tool, and it just made the most hilarious Jolly Roger on his hat. But anyway, regardless of where you're starting, if you're starting with an existing knowledge base or if you have, you want to create a new one, you need to figure out what are your business drivers, what goals are you trying to do, because you're going to have to use resources, specifically time. It is going to take time. So once you do that, because I feel like everything we do in cybersecurity or threat intelligence needs to have a business driver, so that way you can justify it later. The next thing you can do after you figure that out is which platform are you where are you putting this data? We're going to talk about two examples. The first one is very functional for beginners, and that is my all-time favorite tool, Excel or Google Sheets, depending on which platform you want to use. And then we're going to go to the opposite side of the spectrum. Like, it's a fairly complex to start, but once you get into it, it's super useful, and it saves a lot of the thing, or a lot of the cons of Excel. It solves. So it's really great for a lot of things, which we'll get into. Next, you need to think about the taxonomy. And yes, attack by itself is a taxonomy, but it's really how do you want to use the data? Like, are you just going to save it for yourself? Are you going to be collaborating with a team? Are you going to be pushing it out? So you have to think about these things. For this example today, we're just going to be doing old school attack. We're doing tactics, techniques, and procedures. We're not going to leave the procedures out. We're going to add the context. We don't have time today, but there's also some blogs on the attack website. I have it linked at the end that we can share our slides later. But you can use campaigns, you can use sightings if you want to do like clusters of activity, and then you can also use sticks if you like to share it out in groups. That's perfectly fine. I will say the number one thing that you want to make sure that you do is whatever platform you do use, make sure you can keyword search, because otherwise when you go to look at it, it's not going to be super useful. And then if you could filter your queries, that's also super useful. So when I first started out in threat intelligence, I used to get questions from sales or management or insert other stakeholder to, hey, what do we know on Lockbit? Or what do we know on Trigona ransomware? Can you just give me a couple bullets? And I'd be like, yeah, let me just go flounder about for something. And so eventually I just started creating my own knowledge base, and I would specifically map things to MITRE ATT&CK because it was super useful. It was like common taxonomy, and I can disseminate that to anyone. I could filter the results. If I just say, I just want to look at everything Qakbot defense evasion, I could do that. The only issue with this is that you can't really visualize the data that well. And then also for scalability, if you're looking at massive data sets, it's going to be a lot of work. Even though a lot of times you can download the CSV and try and work with it, it still gets a little foggy, but it's a great starting point.
Now, I got my first experience with something way, way, way more complex, and that is the Vertex Project's Synapse tool. And I can, I don't know if this is good, but after 3 months of working with the tool, I can actually switch between different web pages in the UI. It's very, very complex. As you can see, there is a huge graph, lots of little dots, and each of the little dots represent a node. Now, a node can be anything from as large as an industry vertical or as small as a hash value. And they can all be connected in this intertwined force graph that can represent things very, very easily for analysts. You can also see that we have a load of TTPs listed. And the real secret sauce is the TTPs. We can apply these to each node to track them across time. We can apply them to threat actors. We can apply them to behaviors. We can apply them to reputations from other vendors, each identifying all those little dots. So all those little dots are different colors, all mean different things, and incredibly important for threat intelligence.
Yeah, and I will say really quick, the other thing I really love about this is I used to use MISP all the time. And with MISP, you kind of have to do the whole event. Like if you tag a TTP, you have to tag it to the entire event. With Synapse, you can tag it to just one command inside, so it's very granular and awesome. So
you apply the tags to signify relationships between nodes. As you can see, we have CNO TTP defense evasion and an actor pirate ship, but you can query upstream. So you can query data, everything that shows defense evasion tactics, that means all the sub-techniques and the procedures, and everything in relation to the pirate ship threat actor. So it creates really, really useful pieces of data. Now, we're going to move on to Tales from the High Seas, Adventures in Tracking Qakbot. We are very, very new to threat intelligence. As I said before, I have experience in Blue Team, and this is actually my first conference, so I hope I'm doing okay. But yeah, we're going to move on to how we track Qakbot.
I actually have a lot of experience in threat intelligence, but this is the first company that I've worked for where I'm actually threat hunting and threat tracking, and that's all very new. So I'm very much a noob in that area. So you probably all have heard of Qakbot, but just in case you haven't, it is a commodity loader. It actually started out as a banking Trojan, kind of evolved into a commodity loader. If you haven't heard the term commodity loader, it's basically something that could be threat actors can purchase access to use it. Typically, it's used for gaining initial access, and then it will drop a secondary payload, such as ransomware, but it also has a lot of information stealing capabilities. But the commodity loader, it also, because it's a commodity loader, you have to understand when you're tracking it that there's not just one group distributing it. There's multiple groups distributing it. There might be one threat actor distributing IcedID, Qakbot, Darkgate. So you have to keep that in mind during your tracking. And I don't know if everyone can see it because it's not 20 font, but I just thought this was funny, and it goes with our theme. It says message in a bottle, 21st century version. It says, this washes up on shore as you're walking the beach. What's the message? Qakbot. It's believable. Okay, so it was a dark and stormy night. Just kidding. It was a Friday morning. And I was very caffeinated and ready to attack the day on the high seas. I got a tip from someone on our hunting team about some Qakbot activity, specifically with some WSF files. So I asked for some information so that I can go and look in our telemetry and make my own little makeshift query. That was my goal. So I did find some activity, and it either started with a one-note attachment or a zip. And then that led typically to, like, when they opened it, it was like an additional link, but it was hiding in a button. And then, like, that was the link that reached out and either downloaded the zip if it was the one note, or if it was the zip already, it didn't have the extra link. Okay, stay with me. So then the zip would open. Sometimes it would have decoy files in it, like PDFs or TXT files. But the WSF file, I'm assuming was a script, but I couldn't see the contents of it. But after that, it was executed by WScript. There was a PowerShell command. It was obfuscated with base64. There was a bunch of URLs or domains and IP addresses. They were trying to get that Qakbot DLL to be downloaded. And then they also wanted to start that run DLL 32 command. Although the Qakbot DLL, they're using an obfuscated file type, so that captainjack.wsf. Obviously, these are sanitized, but they like to use random names like that, or a lot of times they'll just use, like, you know, pumpkin spice.latte, and that would be the file. So you're like, what's going on? And after that, it would download the Qakbot DLL, and then the run DLL would execute it. And if you notice, system binary proxy execution is not actually a persistence technique in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, but we would see it running on endpoints like over 100 times after the PowerShell. And so us discussing it, we can't think of what else would this be besides persistence. If you know and would like to tell us afterwards, please do. But all we can think of is this is persistence in our mind. And so we said, you know what? The pirate code has no rules. This is really just guidelines. So we added it as persistence. And then the run DLL command would just keep running. And for this example, because we didn't have a lot of time, we're just stopping the examples at that, just to see how they changed over time. So when we found this activity, we were able to find over 100 infected, or over 100 customers impacted. So we were able to send out notifications to these customers, but we had to be able to explain what we were seeing. It was very exciting, but now we have to explain it. I didn't understand, why is run DLL running continuously, and why is they always have a comma and then this other thing? And I was trying to Google it, was not working. I actually asked Jamie Williams from the attack team, because he's a friend of mine. He told me in the most plain English, and I was like, that makes so much sense. And then he literally screenshotted the page from the technique. And I was like, okay, now I feel silly. But just shows, like, education. Like, a lot of people don't realize how much education you can get from attack. And if we're seeing this information, we're like, I'm not sure how this can be used. If you Google it, a lot of times you'll find stuff for, like, you know, operational or engineers. It's like, that's not what I need. I need to know, why is the bad guy doing it so I can tell my customers. So shout out to Attack and Jamie for educating me.
Now, we saw some slight differences across behavior in the months in the beginning of the year. So instead of a spearphishing link, it was instead of a spearphishing email, it was a link with a financial invoice. This financial invoice connected you to an IP that downloaded a .zip file. This .zip file contained a .wsf file in it. Inside, it would use WScript when running on the system to connect to a C2 beacon and download the Qakbot malicious payload, which is slightly different because no PowerShell was involved this time. Instead, conhost.exe was connecting to the run DLL 32 multiple times across the time period. So the indicators continue to change, but the behavior stayed the same. Now, we were pretty happy and pretty over the moon that we were finding these wonderful, huge differences. But it turns out that when we mapped them to attack, things went slightly a little awry.
We were feeling good. We were like, oh, we're great threat hunters. Our queries bringing back so much stuff, and like we're like, hey, the script changed this week to this and this. We thought we were like, you know, ready to write a blog. Like, look at this, all these Qakbot TTPs. So this was some of the final. This was over the course of like 2 months. This one was around June. It started again with a link instead of an attachment, and a lot of times the link would lead to another landing page with sometimes it would have that button, and then they would click that. So it was 2 user execution. And the link or the file that the users usually thought they were downloading, Qakbot or the distributors really, they love to put the month to make it look relevant. So like if it was October, they'd be like October invoice or October schedule. So I thought that was interesting and something that we could zero in on. This time, WScript again, but it was a JavaScript file. There was no archive file. And the PowerShell command that followed was heavily obfuscated. Like I was in CyberChef, you know, I would decode the base64 and then I'd have to like copy and paste that and then put parts of it back in and then decode that and then copy, like it was like layers. And I'm like, the only reason I could think is they're just trying to irritate me. And sometimes they would use random IP addresses that don't even exist. And I'm like, they're messing with us. I know it. And then it became like a personal vendetta. But anyway, after the PowerShell, the run-dll command ran, again, continuously on the endpoint, sometimes upwards of 100 times.
So we thought we were on something big. So across the 3 different cases, we thought we saw a massive change in threat actor behavior. However, when we mapped it to attack, again, the devil is in the procedures. It turned out that instead of huge behavioral shifts, we were just seeing smaller incremental procedural changes. But still, this was an incredibly useful learning experience for us.
So we didn't get a blog. So then, mind you, we were feeling great, and we were like, my query is really, it's doing great. And then it just dropped off, and we were like, why did it drop off? Well,
turns out that instead of flying south, that little birdie was locked up in the brig. So it turns out on August 29th, the FBI released an advisory saying that it had shut down 700,000 devices in a Qakbot botnet, 200,000 in the US alone, and recouped about 8.6 million in cryptocurrency.
So we weren't that bad after all. So just as a recap, don't forget the procedures. That is where all the context lives, and it's useful for not only the people ingesting it, but like younger analysts or people who, I mean, I'm pretty experienced in cyber threat intelligence, but I'm brand new to threat tracking, and that's where I'm going to learn. And it's also where you're going to identify actual trends versus the trends that we thought we were seeing. And then regardless of where you're starting from, you have your you need to have your business drivers. You need to find a platform that works for you and your team, and where you're going to be sharing the data, and then how you're going to organize it, and then map all the things to attack. Find the behaviors, identify the trends.
Now, this is a big point for me because I usually get analysis by paralysis, but don't be ashamed or afraid to ask all the questions. People are willing to help, and as Nicole found out, the information is there and readily available.
Yes, ask Jamie all the questions. And I'll make these available, but I just wanted to give some starting points of like, if you're just starting out using attack versus for CTI, how other people have used it. Also, shout out to Proxy Life. I forgot to mention that. He was another person that I was looking to see if he was also seeing the drop off in activity. He's a security researcher. Thank you.
And I believe another special applause is in order. James, if I heard correctly, this is your first presentation.
Yes,
it is. Well done.
Thank you. I think the largest group I've spoken to is about 15 in my master's degree. So this is definitely a lot larger.
A little bit here and there, especially with the online presence. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I do want to foot stomp what you said. Friends ask questions, friends share knowledge, but also friends don't let friends sling around technique IDs without context. So thank you so much. We do have a couple minutes before we dive into the break for questions. So I do want to give the audience an opportunity if anyone has anything tip of their tongue, going once, twice. I do have something. So I thought it was really interesting the way you outlined, both of you coming from different backgrounds, but kind of coming together on a central shared problem, this new team, this threat tracking and threat clustering. What is, besides the list you gave us, like what has been that big kind of lesson learned, like, oh, I didn't realize this happens coming from blue team to Intel or coming from Intel to threat tracking? Any big like aha moments?
Oh, I can say it. I didn't realize how bad my threat intelligence recommendations were until I was forced to ingest them and use them. Now I'm like, oh, maybe don't just say look for shady PowerShell. Like,
yeah, the amount of variance in logs is very high. But yeah, no, it's just been a really great experience going on the other side. So I've had a lot of. So I usually am the person reading the blog posts and looking for these behavioral trends in our environment, and now hunting that is a completely different experience and one that I very much enjoy.
I imagine. And like, to your point about like context, like shady is probably a very like interesting concept to unpack. So yeah, that's just definitely a major lesson learned. The other one I looking at, I didn't realize where this was going into the distribution or the disruption by the FBI. I gotta say, if you're gonna lose access, that's probably the best reason to. But like generally, I know you mentioned earlier, and I'm a big fan of your like knowledge management and retention learning styles work. Like what do you two do for like internal documentation, especially as you're like, you mentioned some of the Excel and some of those tools. Like, is there any big kind of gotchas or lessons learned in terms of how to like actually make sure, like you said, maybe the actor disappears for a couple of weeks, things change, but make sure you're not losing that thread?
Yes. Well, I would say Cisco Talos does this very well, where you want to document everything because you don't want to go back and like if someone asks you a question or it becomes relevant again, you don't want to flounder. Yeah. And so as much documentation as possible is good, but then also you'll be able to say, okay, this is new because before I was seeing X, Y, Z. So part of it is just experience from having to flounder, but also it's like just our process. We want to be able to explain everything intelligently.
And also platforms like Synapse enable you to search all the data based on a specific node. So if you have that node pop up again, it'll tell you exactly what happened and when. And we also do a lot of, me and Nicole do a lot of internal sharing through like Google Sheets and things. So even though we do have a complex tool like Vertex Synapse, we still use
CTI is always going to be, or Excel is always going to be the greatest tool of all time.
I was going to ask, final question is potential, controversy here, but Excel versus Sheets, any Google hard Sheets opinions?
So I say Excel, but I mean Google Sheets, so I don't want to be embarrassed. Because I'm not a wizard at Excel. I don't know all the cool stuff like Sheets.
Google Sheets is easier.
I always like to say Excel and Sheets are as creative as you are. So it's a canvas. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. A small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.